Farmington, which is why I go to the third ward here. I'm in the third ward is the jurisdiction in which I live. I was born at a very early age in Salt Lake City. Graduated in 1921. So I'm 97 years old. I joined the Utah National Guard in 1938. 145th Field Artillery. In 1941, because of the world political situation, President Roosevelt was calling up National Guard divisions for a one-year training in hopes that they would not be needed, but in case more political problems resulted. And the 40th Division, of which the 145th Field Artillery was a part of, was activated in March of 1941 and stationed at San Luis Obispo, California. About that time, the Army was refiguring the way they had their divisions organized. The divisions were organized in what they call as square divisions. They had 4 infantry regiments with supporting artillery and other ancillary elements. So, to make them a tri-division, or a 3rd division, they started breaking different parts off. And the 145th Field Artillery was one of the units that was removed from the 40th Infantry Division, and on December 6th, we departed San Francisco on one of the Lure Line vessels headed to the Philippines to be the nucleus of a new division artillery in the Philippines. On December 7th, I was standing on the deck of that vessel. It was the Tasker H. Bliss was the name of it, looking out over the fantail for us landlubbers have asphalt and concrete in our blood. Fantail is the tail end of the ship. I was standing there looking out at the fantail, looking at the wake. The wake is the bubbles and froth that's turned out by the propellers driving the vessel. And I saw that wake going straight like that, and then making a 180-degree turn headed back to San Francisco. That was on December 7th because of the attack by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor. We were taken off the ship. We had been loaded what they call administratively, which means the vessel was loaded the most efficient way they could to float and still get you where you're supposed to go. And when it came to combat, why that's not the way to go. So they put us on another ship, which presumably was combat loaded, but I didn't see a heck of a lot of difference. And we went to Hawaii and landed there just before Christmas. We were the first troops from the mainland to reach Hawaii after December 7th, and we were really welcomed. I tell you, they were glad to see us. Just one of the battalions of the 145th Field Artillery was sent there. And the batteries that we had, when we started out, we were armored with French 75 millimeter guns. The French 75 was about the best light artillery in the world, but the old style, it was axial traverse, which means that when you were pointing the gun, if you wanted to move the barrel to the left or the right, you had a wheel you could turn, which moved 200 mils on the axle, but if you wanted to do it more, you had to have somebody get a hold of the trail of the gun and slide that over. So more modern artillery was pintle mounted, and straight shaft, and the gun is mounted on that, so it can turn around not 360 degrees, but a lot more than it could on the axle mount. So when we got to Hawaii, we had those pintle mounted 75s, but the 75 millimeter gun was kind of out of style since, of course, the Japanese were firing with bigger guns. So they changed us from light artillery 75 millimeter to medium artillery, which is 155 millimeter. And we were on Hawaii for most of about 3 or 4 years. And during that time, the 7th Infantry Division had gone in on that too in Kiska because the Japanese had occupied those islands. And they were, of course, the weather and the rain conditions on that too in Kiska were not very amenable to wheeled vehicles. So they took the medium artillery away from the 7th Division and made them have 4 battalions of light artillery. While the 7th Division was released from Mattoon and Kiska, and they were stationed at Hawaii. And then the invasion of Kwajalein came up, which was in January of 1944. And the powers that be thought that they ought to have more than light artillery going when the invasion of Kwajalein. So the 7th Division was tasked with invading Kwajalein, and the 145th Field Artillery, the medium artillery, was attached to them. So that was the first combat operation that we were involved in. After that operation, we came back to Hawaii for a while, and then the Saipan-Tinian operation came into being, and we were not attached to another infantry division, but we became Corps Artillery. Corps Artillery is separate artillery battalions that are gathered together under a Corps commander, and they're used wherever the Corps commander thinks it's appropriate. So that's how we went down to Saipan and Tinian. After Saipan and Tinian, we went to Leyte, the Philippines. The battle was just about all over there. So all we did was camp on the island of Leyte and keep out of trouble, presumably. Then the invasion of Okinawa came up, and we were sent to Okinawa and took part in that particular operation. That time that was pretty late in 1945, and things were starting to wind down, and they were rotating individuals home who had been overseas for a while. And since the 145th Field Artillery had gone overseas on December 7th, why we had quite a bit of seniority in the time served. So different individuals were permitted or selected to come home and be released from service. And I was one of them. And after I got home, I got a job with the Bingham and Garfield Railway, which is out in the Magna area. And that was a rail line. It was under the Interstate Commerce Commission, but it's not the only commercial activity it had was hauling copper from the Bingham Pit open copper mine to the smellers in the Magna area. Copper being a very important element for defense. The Army had taken control over the copper mine and, of course, the railway that was operating on it. After the war was over, they released the control, and the railway immediately went on strike. So I had only been with the B&G Railway, Bingham Garden Railway, for a short time. So while I was standing out without anything going on, decided I'd get back in the Army. And I got back in the Army in 1947. I enlisted as a private, grade 7. I was able to get assigned to an ROTC unit in the Salt Lake City High School, and I was promoted to sergeant. And I had tried to make contact with the university ROTC unit to see if there was a vacancy there. When I enlisted, there wasn't. But after I had high school, the PMS&T at the University of Utah, Colonel Campbell called up and said, "I got a slot for a staff sergeant up here if you want to take it." So I went to my PMS&T who got me the job. He said, "Well," he said, "I got you this job." He said, "But I'll never stand in the way of a soldier that has a promotion." So I went up to the University ROTC as a staff sergeant. While there, I was promoted to tech sergeant. And about that time, the Army was trying to reconstitute the Reserve Officer Corps, because the reservists, which had been called during the war, they did their reserve duty, and they were tired of military duty. So they had officer positions that you appear before a board and say, "I've been a good boy." So I got a reserve commission. And after I'd had that reserve commission for a short time, I applied for active duty, and I was sent up to Fort Lewis, Washington, and joined the 2nd Infantry Division. The 2nd Infantry Division was about the first unit called to go over to Korea in 1950, following the invasion by the North Korean armies. And we went over there, and I was in the field artillery outfit in the service battery. It was kind of exciting. I was a forward observer. Forward observer is the artillery officer that's attached to an infantry company. And he has contact by radio back to repair battery battalion, and he adjusts artillery fire on the enemy that's out there in front of him. In December, in Thanksgiving of 1950, the Chinese came in, and they hit the 2nd Division, where I was, pretty hard. And I got wounded there, and was evacuated to a MASH unit, and the wound was a small shot that went through my side. It didn't hit any vital organs, but it went in, went out again. When the doctor got a hold of me, he laid me face down on a gurney, and I could kind of look around and see, and he took an anesthetic and cleaned the area where the wound was, and put a local anesthetic in and cut in the middle so we could get to the channel where that missile had gone through me. And he took what I thought was a 45 caliber cleaning rod, well, it was really gauze that he put in it, but I thought it was for cleaning rifles. He soaked it with merthiolate, and then he poked it in one end of it, and then the other end, and then he had cut it in the middle, and when he poked it in and came to the middle, he pulled that gauze out and was going up and down like this. course, I had an awful lot of say, so I didn't feel any pain, but I could feel it going up and down like that. And then they bandaged me up and laid me out in a tent on an air mattress, and we were going to be evacuated to, well, it ended up going to be evacuated to Seoul area in Korea. So the Army had a hospital there that had been coming over with the intention that the Korean War was not all over, which it was before the Chinese came in. And I was in that hospital there, all that wound was healing up. So that's about the end of my excited story. And how long am I supposed to take, Dave? Question?
Yeah, so were you a member of the church through all this military experience?
Say again?
Were you a member of the church through all of this military
Yes,
experience?
I was a member of the church.
How did the gospel play into all of that for you?
Well, I hate to tell you, but I wasn't paying too much attention to the gospel. Later in my military career, every place I was either a group leader or a district leader for the LDS members who were members of the military. And that was very rewarding, and I really felt blessed being able to do that. Any other questions?
How did you meet Ruth? Were you married, and how did you meet Ruth during all of this?
Say again?
Were you married during this time? And how did you meet Ruth, your wife?
Was I married at this time? Yes, I got married in 1945. What was the rest of your question?
How did you meet?
How did I what?
How did you meet Ruth?
I met Ruth at the University of Utah before the war.
Very good.
I was in the class that she was in. That's how I met her. Anything else? Well, thank you very much.
Wallace, tell us about your children and when you moved to Farmington.
Say again?
Tell us about your children and when you moved to Farmington.
Well, I have 8 children, and Ruth was born in Farmington, but she moved out when she was about 3 years old, down to Mount Pleasant for a while, which was her father's residence, and then moved back to Salt Lake City, where she was when I met her. And her mother was also born in Farmington, born in the house 79 South 3rd East here in Farmington, which was in her mother's family, the cultural family. And her mother was born in that house, Ruth was born in that house. And the house got out of the cultural family, but we bought it and we own it now. And Mrs. Barton, which is Ruth's mother, having been born in Farmington, had a hard time forgetting all about Farmington. And when her husband was killed on a motorcycle, she came out to Farmington and bought the house at 40 North, 100 West, where we now live. I retired from the Army after 30 years service, sometime in 1972. And whenever I was on a hardship tour where I could not have dependents with me, Ruth always came home to Grandma with our kids. So Mrs. Barton was living here in Farmington. Ruth came out and lived with her. So I wanted to live with Ruth. So I lived in the Barton household for a while. And we had an opportunity to buy the house across the street from it. 37 North, which we bought and we now own. Well, that's about it. Anything else?
Will you bear your testimony a little?
Well, I want you to know that the gospel has been a wonderful thing, whether a person is active in it or not. They give you something to tie into, something to be proud of. And I do believe the church is true. And I'm grateful that our Father in heaven gave His Son, Jesus Christ, to us, that we could learn the covenants and promises that we must make and take if we want to return to His presence.
I'd like to know how you get your children to do the things that they do and how you have developed the relationship that you have with your children and your grandchildren to where that they honor and respect you the way they do.
I don't know, just doing what comes naturally. There was a song about that. Folks where I come from don't have any learning. Still they raise a family doing what comes naturally. He goes on to say that my grandpa down in Texas can't even spell his name, but he signs his check with X's and they cash them just the same. David, this is your party.
All right. I thank you. I appreciate it.
Say again.
Thank you for sharing that information, your testimony with us and about yourself.
Thank you, Wally. I have a hearing problem, as you might guess, and I don't hear too much. I moved into country care because I have a balance problem and things like that. And country care is, you know, we go down there and provide church services over the years. I'm now down there.
Glad you could come and visit with us.
Say again?
Glad you could come and visit with us.
Yeah, I'm visiting with you today. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenn.
We need the comic relief.
Say again?
The comic relief, we love it.
Say I got that
You're
hearing
funny.
Comic relief. He says you provide comic relief.
Things with music with your wife?
My music ability was turning on the radio and the TV. So to answer your question, I didn't do really anything musically for Ruth, although she did conduct a Composers Guild, but had an international contest where people were invited to send in original compositions. And she organized them and got judges, evaluated them, collected the dues, and I was helping with the financial bookkeeping end of it, writing the checks, putting the prizes out, and when we go to the concerts, of course, always present there.
Tell us about your priesthood service. Did you hold callings, and what was your favorite? Your priesthood service, your priesthood callings. What did you do, and what was your favorite?
Well, probably about in 1946 and 1947, the Harleys, we had a house on 21st East and about 15th South. That was in the Parley's ward. The Parley's ward was a white frame chapel on the corner of 21st South and 21st East. It was very small, and the house that we bought was in the subdivision there. And when they had services, the place was packed, really packed. They'd always have to pass the sacrament twice because there were so many people there. And they split that ward into two wards, the Laurel Crest ward and the, can't even remember the name of the other ward. I think it was Beacon ward, but I'm not sure. And the bishop called me to be the clerk there. I was a membership clerk, and I found that very interesting and very rewarding.
What can we do to help you while you're out at Country Care?
I'm doing fine. Ruth died on September 15th last year. We'd been married 72 years, 2 months, and 4 days. It was a wonderful time, but she's gone.
Does anybody else have any questions for Wallace?
At 97 years old, what wisdom would you want us to know or impart to us, I guess?
The way you get old like this is to always wake up in the morning. I think I've said enough. Told you more than I really know. Well, it's like combat stories. The older they get, the better they get.
Wallace, thank you. Thank you very much, Wallace.